y Pierre nos van a explicar su manera, su propuesta para pasar de la visión a la acción. Y después entraremos en todo lujo de detalles en las discusiones siguientes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lidia. Thank you very much for giving us the possibility to present to you our vision for the development of diamonds globally and how we can implement that in reality as a practice. So we are here as the we have several hats, so we are here speaking as co-PIs of the DIAMAS project more particularly. And I will share with you the first information from the first half of this presentation. So the story has been told already, so I will go fast on this story of how we ended up with what we are going to present to you. But I will insist maybe on some aspects that were not told completely during the previous presentation. So you remember that in March 2020, Science Europe and Coalition S published this tender to do a study to explore collaborative non-commercial open access publication models for open access, aka Diamond OA. And 1 year, in fact, with 10 organizations, so that's something that was not highlighted, but I just want to highlight it. The study that we did, the Open Access Diamond Journal study, was a true collaborative effort between 10 organizations and people coming from 10 teams to make this research team to do this research on open access diamond journals. And of course, among the organizations and in the team, we had the pleasure to have Redalyc and Ariana. You remember, Ariana, all the meetings we did all together to make progress on this study. But of course, there is Spark Europe, universities, DOAJ, etc. So after 1 year of hard work, we were in a position to publish the results of this study in March 2021. And of course, all the results are available. It's still interesting to have a look on our findings and recommendations coming out of this study. Because it was, I think, the first time that we could establish a landscape at a global level of the diamond sector so widely, I would say. So we discovered during this study, and at the end of the study, our main conclusion was that the diamond sector is very wide, encompassing up to 29,000 diamond journals worldwide, but it's a very fragmented landscape because most of the journals, most of the teams who support these journals are very small, very isolated, and they don't have a lot of resource to cooperate, to federate, to scale up. So it's a wide sector, but highly fragmented, highly isolated, and based on low resources. So that was the main output, the main finding out of this study. Hence, our recommendations. Of course, we don't detail the recommendations here because it would be too long, but we chose to present to you maybe the most important recommendation from this report, which was to create a diamond capacity hub to help this community converge, be coordinated, align, pool resources, and cooperate. And I just want to say also here that the idea of creating a diamond capacity hub is coming from Vanessa Prodman from Spark Europe, who was participating in this team. So thank you very much, Vanessa, for this brilliant idea of creating this diamond capacity hub. It was a brilliant idea indeed, because 1 year after, in March 2022, when there was the action plan for diamond open access, of course, the plan was to align, to develop common resources for the entire Diamond OA ecosystem, including journals and platforms, while respecting their diversity. But once again, in the Diamond Action Plan, one of the recommendations was the establishment of this Diamond Capacity Hub. So there is a continuity there, year after year, along the different steps that we took to push forward our action. Taken forward from the Action Plan for Diamond Open Access, the European Commission had the good idea to publish two call for collaborative projects to support in Europe the diamond sector. So at the same time, there were two calls published in the framework of Horizon Europe, published by the European Commission, to set up and to develop projects to support the diamond sector in Europe on both technical and non-technical side. So now you have the two projects, Diamas and Craft-OA, who started at the end of 2022 or at the beginning of 2023 to really implement some of the recommendations that have been published and shared in the OA Diamond Journal Study and in the Diamond Action Plan. So here we are, co-PIs of Diamas project, and 1 year ago we started to work according to the plan. And we thought that we had 3 years ahead of us to implement all the actions that were in the project. So you see here more details about the Diamas project. Duration 36 months, so 3 years basically. It started in September with a budget of 3 million euros. And I just want to tell you also that it's a highly collaborative project with 23 public service scholarly organizations from 12 European countries participating to this effort. The objectives of the project are to provide to the community an aligned and high quality and sustainable OA scholarly communication system, to create a community supporting services and non-technical infrastructure for what we call institutional publishing service providers that we can consider as diamond service providers and publishers, and to develop common standards, guidelines, and best practice across the board and across the community. It's very easy to understand because you see that the objectives of the project are just addressing this need for cooperation, this need for alignment, this need for synergies inside or across this highly fragmented landscape. So we address the fragmentation by providing coordination effort at several levels. Very simple to understand. But, as you said, Lidia, in May 2023, the European Council surprised us because that there was a momentum. And of course, we have to keep up with the momentum to make propositions and concrete propositions to align with this new policy effort, to propose concrete solutions that address the new policy. So it has accelerated the momentum to build a common infrastructure for not-profit scholar-led OA publishing. And of course, we understood immediately that the infrastructure that we have discussed that during the first 2 days of the conference must be international and long-term sustainable. And we will discuss it again during the next 2 days. So such an infrastructure should be distributed, of course, and that's where we continued with this idea of having a Central European Capacity Hub link to a set of national and regional capacity centers which are near and close to the local communities, but with a need of coordination across those specific communities. And of course, this, let's say, framework of coordination at a regional level for Europe, it sounds maybe familiar to some of you, because of course it looks like Redalyc. And we would just want to say that we were inspired by Redalyc in the development of the concept of this European capacity hub. And that's something that we want to do in coordination with you, Redalyc. So the next part is on you, I think.
Thank you, Pierre. So what we really need to do is, in fact, recognize the fact that we can collaborate globally to align practices and training and services and to work on the interoperability of platforms. This is something that I think should take the form of a global structure, a globally aligned and coordinated infrastructure. I mean, it's nice to have, you know, structures like Redalyc and other structures in the world that exist, Open Edition and you know, other structures that exist to support Diamond Open Access. But even these larger structures, it's not just the journals that do not operate in a coordinated fashion, but it's also these larger infrastructures that do not always cooperate enough, I believe. And I remind you of what Pierre said yesterday in his quite moving intervention. Together we are stronger, and I think that's really true. If we really want Diamond to compete with the commercial sector, who moves in an international and a global fashion, then we really need to organize as well at the global level. That is what we need to do. Together we are stronger. So how do we do that? How do we do that? So this is something that Pierre and I had been thinking about for a while. And so this is what we propose, and this is a completely open proposal. It's not something that is written in stone at all. It's just the fruit of our reflection over the last few months. Namely, we would like to propose a light structure to this. And again, this is inspired by Redalyc and other existing structure, namely 4 levels. Begin, of course, at the bottom with community and with diamond journals, right? The communities, diamond journals are communities. I always say that. I mean, you know, your journal is a community, and we should recognize that. But these communities need, of course, coordination at some point. These journals need coordination, they need technical services, and that is something that can be delivered at the level of the Diamond Capacity Centers. These can be of various types. I mean, I think this is this is something we need to think about, but this is something that could be a very rich typology. On the one hand, you could have disciplinary capacity centers who think about, you know, how a cluster of journals in a specific discipline could move together and could adopt practices that are common to Diamond Open Access. But you could also have capacity centers that strictly look at the technical side of things, right? That give you an OJS install or that help with copy editing and typesetting. And so Diamond journals could be serviced by several of these disciplinary or technical capacity centers, which are local, could be a university library, for instance, right? Or could be a department, could be a lab, but it could also be national. The reason that I say it could be national is that we found in the DIAMAS project that the national level is really extremely important. I mean, the biggest response we got in our Europe-wide survey of Diamond Open Access journals came from countries where, in fact, Diamond Open Access journals were organized at the national level. I'm thinking of the 500 journals that are coordinated by FACIT in Spain. It's a little bit more even than 500, I believe. The 200 Diamond Open Access journals in Finland, coordinated by the societies, the Finnish Societies of Science, the 500 journals in Croatia, and 500 plus journals that are managed by Open Edition in France. That's where we see that you already have communities. And why is this national level important? National level is important because of legislative issues that you run into when you run a capacity center like this. So it's very important that the legislative aspects are in sync with the way Diamond journals are run. So this national level is an important one. So that's why I insist on it. I was discussing this yesterday with Ariana. Ariana said just exactly the same. They have these centers, they have some of these, what we call capacity centers at the national level, here also in Latin America, because the legislative context is sometimes different and you want to take that into account. Also because these more local services know the local situation in a country and can react more rapidly as needed. At the same time, we believe that it's necessary to have a level just above that, which is a regional, level. That's something I think, again, that we learned from Redalyc. Latin America has its own specificities. In the same way, I think Europe has its own specificities in terms of organization. We already said it, the EC has played an enormously important role, and Science Europe have played an enormously important role in federating these thoughts about diamond open access journals in Europe, and has provided funding, and also provide, again, a legislative framework at the European level. If we look at North America, we again have different challenges, right? I mean, we know that North America is very different, not so much government intervention in the education sector, shall we say, to put this very mildly. But 3,000 universities that have a lot of independence, that many of them have university presses that play an important role in academic publishing. So if you want a solution for diamond open access publishing in the United States, you will have to engage and operationalize these actors. I talked recently to two representatives from Indonesia. In Indonesia, the situation is still entirely different. It was just informed that there are 14,000 diamond open access journals in Indonesia that are being managed on a shoestring, basically. I mean, I think we can learn important lessons from them. This is something that we will certainly do going forward. But so we need these regional hubs. Africa is another case, right? So we need, I think, these regional diamond capacity hubs. One for Africa, North America, Latin America. We already have it. Indonesia, you name it. But we need to think about what these could be. And then we need the fourth level, this Global Diamond Federation. Right, the Global Diamond Federation, which would federate these various levels. Now, let me go into some of the details of these four levels. Journals. What do we expect from journals? Well, in fact, journals should do what journals do, namely publish papers, right? Soliciting reviews, making decisions, apply international quality standards, ensure ownership and governance of their journals. And what they should not do is be worried about where the money should come from for copy editing and typesetting. That should be done at the level of the Diamond Capacity Centers. So they should help the journals, the Diamond Capacity Center should help the journals with tools, administration, platforms, money, governance, ownership, guidelines, best practices, and training, and help these journals reach alignment with quality standards. We know that not all of the diamond journals are at the same level. Let's develop tools to bring these journals to that level that we need. Multilingualism can also be handled at this level, again, because I said, these are national hubs as well, so national hubs know how to deal with the multilingualism at their national level. And then finally, the final slide on regional capacity hubs could ensure alignment of these capacity centers, pool resources, coordinate services, standards, and practices, look at legislative aspects in their region, work with the specificities of their region, ensure complementarity and subsidiarity of the capacity centers. Create efficiencies, exchanges of specialists across the region. This is something we already discussed with Pierre. In Europe, for instance, you could have, Finnish specialists of open access publishing going to Italy and vice versa to exchange their experiences. You could imagine the same for the Americas, with exchanges across the Americas of specialists who learn a common language and learn and adopt common tools. And then finally, the Global Diamond Federation. Again, I've given an example of 4 things that they could do. Technical interoperability of platforms, that it seems an important one, right? That's certainly something that should be global. Exchanges of services and financial complementarity across regions. I mean, we all know that the North has more money than the South, and maybe we should redistribute a bit. Mutual learnings across the various regions. I certainly learned, from my conversation of 10 minutes about Indonesia with you guys, I already learned a lot, and I think we should do that more, because you can sometimes learn a lot from people who have no money at all to run their journals. It's amazing what you can learn. And also set priorities for global expansion of Diamond OA. How do we do that? What are the challenges we see in the different regions, and how can we help each other across regions? So these are just a few things that we think about. This is, of course, just a proposal. right? It's really an open proposal. Nothing is written in stone here. But at the same time, even if it's just a proposal, I would also, Pierre and I would like to say that, you know, the first steps for this, the Diamond Federation, which I do think we need, could include setting up a task force with representatives of various global, from various global regions and services supported by a light secretariat so that they make progress, so that there is an agenda moving this forward, should read regularly and then make a proposal for the aims and scope of the Global Diamond Federation that then can be discussed in the global community by all the organizations that we know and love, and that we can take forward as a strong global force. So again, I'm going to repeat what Pierre said yesterday, which I thought was very, together we are stronger. We can do this. I mean, we can do this. We share these values, we share these principles. Let's do it. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Pierre. Muchas gracias, Johan. Maybe for the sake of time, because we have time until 1:45, but not more for now. But don't worry, because as I said before, sorry, I'm switching to English now. This session has several parts. So now Pierre and Johan have presented their proposal, how to move on. They have jotted some ideas. I'm sure you already have questions, but let's hold on for a moment, because the proposal for this session is the following. We now hear some examples of possible governance systems, and we have our panelists that will give a glimpse on possible governance that are already functioning in other research infrastructures. After lunch, we will have a few other short interventions regarding financing. So we are going to discuss governance and financing, and we will have then a roundtable, open roundtable, no speeches, moderated by Anna Persic from UNESCO, who will moderate the dialogue with all the questions and proposals that you may also have. So there will be plenty for time for discussion after we have heard the initial statements, which is where we are moving now. So, you would like to start? Short, please. Yes, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kamran Naim. I'm the head of open science at CERN, which is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. Just so people have a little bit of context about CERN itself, it is the largest particle accelerator facility in the world. We are host to the world's largest scientific instrument, which is the Large Hadron Collider. We have about 12,500 researchers working at CERN on any given day. So as you can imagine, it's a highly dynamic environment. The discipline itself, in order to function, really needs to facilitate information sharing in the most effective way. So that has been part of the DNA of our discipline. And I mean, it led to the rise of archive and also the birth of the web in order to facilitate rapid sharing amongst researchers around the world. In the early part of this century, following the three major open access declarations, some very smart people at CERN, with others, recognized that there was an opportunity to leverage the kind of structure that supports the scientific collaborations that work within CERN to not only ensure open access for our research outputs, but really to work at the disciplinary level. So with that, the sponsoring consortium for open access publishing in particle physics was established. It took a number of years to build, a lot of time for one person in particular, Salvatore Mele, traveling around the world, trying to convince people to join the collaboration. But since 2014, and we're now entering our 10th year, Scope 3 has provided effectively a diamond open access model for the entire discipline of particle physics. So I was asked to talk a little bit about governance and what that means. So Scope 3 now is it's effectively a global collective action. There are participants from 45 member countries. It is fully democratic and is a participatory governance model that's managed and controlled entirely by members of the consortium. CERN, just like for the research collaborations, only acts as the host organization. Participants in the collaboration sign an MOU, which is technically legally non-binding. Initially, part of the criticism of this kind of collective open access approach was that there would be immediate free riding. So once things were made open, there was no incentive for institutions to continue to participate. And that has actually never played out. And I'll talk a little bit about why I think that is. But actually, rather than countries dropping out, the consortium has grown over time. So it started with 25, we're now at 45 countries. The main decision-making body for Scope 3 is its governing council, which consists of its membership, 45 seats that are assigned to countries, and it's based on their relative share of the literature in the discipline. And the financial contributions to Scope 3 that support its operations are also based on that proportional share of the literature, looking at the journals as a open access publishing service, and then looking at periodically to see which countries use the service and at what rate and what percentage, and that determines the financial contributions. The Governing Council meets each year and reviews and debates the progress of the initiative, decides on future strategies. All strategic initiatives are led by members of the consortium itself and not by CERN. So we have a books initiative and different working groups that decide the future shape of the initiative and what we're going to do next. There's an executive committee which oversees day-to-day operations, and only the kind of very operational stuff is managed by a small team of folks at CERN. So building a diverse consortium did require significant investment. And people ask me all the time, why has Scope 3 never really been replicated across other disciplines? And I think it's because there's never really been kind of an organizing entity that did the work, that brought all the different participants together to focus on a goal of achieving a global equitable approach to open access. But we've demonstrated that collective action can work. It's been running for 10 years now. It requires continued engagement. Participation of partners is key. They need to have a sense of shared ownership and responsibility, transparency of activities and finances, and to ensure the process remains democratic and that everyone has a voice and an opportunity to shape the strategic direction of the initiatives. I'm done. But yeah, just to say finally, people question the sustainability. We're now at a decade. We've published over 65,000 articles, fully open access with no APCs for any authors, and 45 countries have enabled participation and publication for authors from 120.
Thank you.
So.
Let's now hear the speaker who is not here with us because he's online. So Cochrane, sorry, I can't pronounce this name. Can we have him on the screen? Yes, thank you. Welcome, Guy. No?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Great. And do you see a...
Now we see you.
Okay.
And now, yeah, the presentation is coming.
Okay. And you see a full screen slide?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. I'm going to try and cut this down a little bit to fit time to reduce. So please bear with me. But thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to be there to enjoy Mexico. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data domain in the life sciences, And I think when we think about scholarly publication and scientific data in the life sciences, I'm sure there could be endless discussions about, whether it is the data that complement the publications or the publications that complement the data. But ultimately, I think there would be broad agreement that actually there's a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship and many parallels in the kind of approaches and when we think about open access and what that means. So my organization, the Global Biodata Coalition, concerns itself with the sustainability of data resources. So the data resources for the life sciences that scientists use day in, day out to share their data, to analyze their data, and to publish their data. Very little advance happens in the life sciences without reference to existing data. So there's a big history of openness. And most studies involve the production of some new data as well that requires the transactions, the sharing, and the publication. So what I'll do is I'll just characterize a little bit briefly the nature of these biodata resources, how they're laid out around the world. I will introduce the main challenge we face at the moment, because it's a sort of parallel challenge to the one that we're discussing in this meeting, and then talk about some of the work we're doing and finish up with some comments that connect, I think, the Diamond Open Access world to the life science data resource world. So there's a great history of openness, and arguably the life science data resources are in some functionally equivalent in some ways to a Diamond Open Access model. You get your data into the system freely with minimal encumbrance. The data are organized and structured, and they're fed out and they're accessible to scientists around the world freely without much encumbrance. And so we've sort of achieved the open inwards and open outwards aspects, but we are also facing the sustainability challenges, and that's really why our organization exists. So you have different kinds of data resource. They all have open services. They're typically facing outwards to the community across the world. There are services to deposit data, services to capture reference data, to present knowledge bases, encyclopedic kind of views. There's a lot of curation. Value is added through the curation. There's integration into comprehensive and authoritative data sets. And the data resources are very connected. So they exist in their thousands, and I'll come on to this, all around the world. And the databases typically grow from academic labs as demand increases. So there is no top-down coordination of this. So although all of these databases make up an infrastructure, it doesn't start off by being coordinated in any central way. But the databases are highly connected. There is a lot of data flowing from one to another. There are the generalist data resources, and they tend to be the feeders for more specialist data resources that focus on particular areas. And so just to give an indication of the value of the whole ecosystem of data resources as a whole, that goes a long way beyond the sum of the individual values. And so back in the, taking COVID examples, back in the beginning of the pandemic in early 2020, it was possible to make very rapid advances scientifically with COVID because we already had significant data sets that were openly available and well curated, being presented by different databases. So, for example, DNA or RNA sequence databases, protein domain organization, and pathway databases were all available for people to use. And within a few months, in record time, it was possible to use this knowledge to design vaccines and to begin to implement vaccine programs. Down at the bottom here is an example of drug repurposing. So it's much more rapid to repurpose existing drugs that have been licensed for existing purposes. It's much quicker to be able to repurpose because one knows about the safety of the drugs. And so here we have structural biology data, some protein structures and some nucleoside structures. And it was possible using these data to find a likely drug that was already in use with safety data that were again available in open databases, quickly to move to know that this was in this case, molnupiravir was an appropriate antiviral drug to repurpose. And that's had a substantial impact around the world in frontline therapy against COVID. So the system is truly global, and just to show the example of Mexico here. So here we're looking at, the numbers are low, we're looking at a sample of a life science data set. It happens to be sequence data. but we don't have the information about where sequences come from in most cases. And as you well know, not all text that describes the use of data records is available openly in a text mineable fashion. And so this is a small sample, but the numbers, the patterns we see elsewhere in the world, and the numbers are the relative numbers are quite indicative. And so think of this as a sort of trade balance, that you have authors writing publications outside Mexico that are citing data that come from samples from within, biological samples within Mexico. So we have 1,700 of these. If you take authors in Mexico, then you have 458 authors that are citing data from samples that come from other countries around the world. And then the yellow loops here are authors who are working in Mexico who are citing data from samples that come from Mexico as well. So this is sort of self-use. So it's sort of import, export, self-use. And importantly, these numbers are all positive. All of these things are happening. So the use of sequence data in this case is global. Then consider that the databases that are serving these data are not in Mexico, or certainly not in Mexico at the moment. So these databases are in North America, in Asia, and in Europe. And so that the arrows aren't shown, but that's another trip around the world. So this is typical of how life science data resources work. There are many of them, many thousands, all around the world, and they're highly connected, and their use is collectively, typically. So the demand is increasing. The platforms we have for generating data increase significantly all the time. We love open access, but it increases the demand on data resources. There are new requirements for data management planning that increase the demand, and there are new technologies all the time. So the system needs to do more. The infrastructure of data resources needs to do more. And because of the way all of this has grown up around the world, it's the funding has been very haphazard and unevenly distributed, and there's almost no coordination between funders. And if you look at the right here, we're just looking at a subset of life science data resources in Europe, and we're looking. A question was asked in 2018. So these bars here are the measured in the number of staff. These are the secure. This is secured funding. And so in 2018, when we asked the question, well, how many staff do you have secure funding for? People could say yes. Overall, it was 300 people. And we asked the question, well, what about next year? And then the following year and the following year. And the amount of certain funding stays fairly consistent for 2-3 years. But when you get 4 years ahead, it drops really significantly. And having this kind of a 3-year window to plan an infrastructure that needs to last for decades and needs to plan for proper, to keep the appropriate expertise, to procure the right hardware or the cloud, or to build the system strategically. This really doesn't work. So the Global Biodata Coalition came about as a coalition of life science research funding organizations to address this, to recognize that this infrastructure is critical for life sciences and for their programs, to recognize that threats exist to its sustainability, and then to accept the need to cooperate globally to address sustainability. And so we have 11 different funding organizations at the moment, national funders, and a couple of foundation-based funders, a number of observers who are on a path to membership, and we're very active in trying to recruit from further parts of the world and different kinds of funding organizations as well. These things matter to their funding programs, to their research programs. So because of the way the infrastructure has grown around the world, we don't even know how many data resources there are and exactly what they are. So this is a study we carried out last year to find them. So we use the open literature, and we make the assumption that if someone is running a biodata resource, then they will invite people to use it by publishing a paper that describes it. And that's a common practice in the life sciences. So we find 3,112 different data resources. We can find information about their funders, and we can find information about the individuals and the institutions that run them. So we're beginning to profile the based on literature descriptions, beginning to profile this long tail of data resources. We can also identify the bigger players, those that are typically more generalist and meet certain criteria. So certainly free and open access. Those that are used genuinely globally, they're mature, they're authoritative, they're recognized, high value, professional standard. So we went through an externally reviewed process to select what we call global core biodata resources. and we're going through a second round to do this. We have 37 from that first round. But what we can do with the people that run these data resources is really help to develop the kind of mechanisms we need to have to allow for greater sustainability around the world. And so this is a consultation. This is the funders talking to each other, thinking about sustainability, thinking about open data strategies, and putting together some really quite deep and rich consultation papers. So I do encourage people to go and have a look at these and feedback. It has a strong overlap with the literature publication world. And so finally, just to say why I think this is relevant for this community, there is a close connection, an essential interaction between scientific data and scholarly publication.
May I please ask you to wrap up, because we are really late on time. Sorry, but can you please wrap up?
Sure.
This is
the last slide. So those in the Diamond Open Access community are stakeholders in the success of the biodata resources. The life science literature services are in scope already for what we're doing at GBC. So we index the literature in some of our data resources. There are deep policy and technical connections between literature and biodata resources, and these need to be sustained and strengthened. I think that's part of thinking about Diamond Open Access. For example, the GCBR status can be used as a basis for recommendations to authors as to how to handle certain biological data types. The delivery, I think, of successful Diamond Open Access requires a healthy and sustainable biodata resource infrastructure. And so we encourage further engagement through the consultation process, consideration and membership, and look forward to further discussion. And I regret that I'm not going to be able to be in the discussion later on today. But so with that, I will leave a page up that tells you how you can learn more about what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, let's hear Juan Pablo.
So thank you. Yeah, it's always the dubious position of being the last thing before everyone is off to lunch and after we're already over schedule. But I want to keep it brief. I want to talk a little bit in keeping in the fluidity of the session and of the program, which continues to always be an aspiration that we're trying to keep to, and talk a little bit not so much about how PKP is governed, but to talk a little bit about what our role is in this community and what are the expectations of that the community has of PKP, and that maybe we need to also set for ourselves and what our role is in this place. Because as I was thinking about how I would intervene in this panel about governance and in this space, it got me to start reflecting a little bit more of what is my own personal role as the co-scientific director of PKP, as an academic that has been working in this space now for 16 years. Just a quick moment of reflection of thinking back to, with Ariana, I think I met 15 years ago in 2008, and thinking back at a time when Europe wasn't looking at all to what was happening in Latin America, and to think of the far path that we've come in those 15 years as we have been since that time. I think both Redalyc, PKP, and myself and Ariana personally have all been really trying to push and promote the model of what's been happening in Latin America and showcase it to the rest of the world. It is really nice to see that the world has been finally starting to pay attention to the way that things have been operating in this region. But in my own role as the scientific director of PKP, I sort of end up playing this needing to guide PKP as an organization. I'm on the board of organizations like OASPA. We're also asked to represent the PKP community in that place. In the partnership that we have with ERUD and Coalition Publica, representing the Canadian infrastructure. So we have this place in the community. There's we estimate now over 30,000 journals around the world that are using our software, the vast majority of which are Diamond. So even though we're now on to the third day here, I think I've lost count already of the number of times that PKP and OJS have been mentioned by the various people that have been on stage. So our presence and our role as the providers of software is clear. There's no, I think, debate or need to even call attention to the fact that PKP and OJS are central to the Diamond Open Access ecosystem as an infrastructure. I think at this point, as like good infrastructure has gone into the background where it's understood that it's just part of what's back there. But what I think is in question, or I think that we need to reflect on, is what is our role as PKP in representing these 30,000 plus journals in this space? Because we don't have a mandate in any official way from that community to act as a voice for them, nor do we have any capacity to intervene at all in their operations, to dictate anything that they do, to impose on them any standards, or even a utilization of the software. By nature of how we have grown in the community by providing this software that can be self-managed and self-hosted, that allows people to use it however they want, for whatever kinds of journals they want. And we see from student journals to people using the platform to publish conferences and conference proceedings instead of journals. People can use this software however they want, and that has been part of our success and part of how we've been enabling the community to do what it wants. In that same sense, it means that we don't have the power to then say, this is what we think that you should do, or to actually make them act on those activities. And so we are increasingly called on to be a voice for these 30,000 plus journals. I think that we take on that responsibility very seriously and try to do justice to the really diversity and the global nature of that community as best as we can. But we don't have a governance structure within PKP that really captures in a formal way what do they want us to say in these forums, right? And so as we start debating what is a way of formalizing a governance structure for Diamond and for promoting Diamond, it calls into question, well, how would PKP fit into this role? I mean, if we are going to take this pyramid, we fit into this global layer, and as I said, because our presence is really felt everywhere in the world in terms of where our software is utilized. But at the same time, we have more direct contact, let's say, with the journal editors that are operating at that bottom level, and we have a bit more sense of what it is that they're feeling and needing to see. And so I'm not going to really come forward with solutions, and in the interest of cutting this intervention short, I'll say that this is a conversation that I think needs to be had around organizations like PKP. I think DOAJ, for example, is in a similar category of having the similar kind of global presence. They don't have they're not providing the infrastructure and the operations of the journals, but they are also being called on to represent all of the journals that are part of their membership. But do we need to put in place within our organizations that governance to be able to act as that voice? Or does there need to be a different kind of a mechanism and position and role that we play? And when we're asked to be part of also present in the International Advisory Board of the Diamas and Craft Away project. So when we're asked to be present in these roles, the question is, what can we really do to represent that community well? And how can that community then come to, in a way that community then takes what we say and we propose and we recommend to heart and in its adoption. I'll leave it there in the interest of time. I think there's lots that I want to say about Diamond OA and around PKP's role in it, but just to say that we're happy to be here and to be part of the conversations. And I think that this is an important key component as we try to imagine what governing or trying to organize and coordinate these communities could really mean.
Thank you very much. Thank you.